What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. This is Best Served Podcast 176. We're talking local grains with Ryan Burchett of Mississippi River Distilling Company. Ryan, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Jensen. Appreciate it.
All right, so this channel, Best Served Chilled, for everyone. You know, we're talking about beverage producers, about beverage professionals, really focusing on the beverage side of food and beverage. Obviously, Ryan is owner distiller, and you are in LeClaire, Iowa. Tell us a little bit about LeClaire, what's happening there, what's happening with you and the distillery. When people think about Mississippi River Distilling, what do you want them to know?
Well, first of all, ironically, we're in Iowa. People are like, oh, you're not from Mississippi, but
right.
It is a pretty long river. It starts in Minnesota, goes all the way through the country. So we are right on the banks of the Mississippi, right where I-80 crosses the river. So you're about halfway between Chicago and Des Moines, right outside of Davenport, Iowa, the Quad Cities. No one's heard of LeClaire unless you watch American Pickers. We're about 3 blocks from where that show started, and they still shoot down there. So that's our claim to fame here. That and Buffalo Bill Cody was born a couple blocks down the road. So
those are two pretty good historical and contemporary references. You're doing all right in the zeitgeist of American culture.
Right. You know, for a town of about 3,500, we're not too bad here. But here in the heartland, you know, we are right in the breadbasket of the country. We are growing all the corn and grain right here. And so we thought we ought to do something cool and make it into booze. And that's what we do here. It's an authentic grain to glass distillery. We do everything from the raw grain to the final bottling right here. We get our grain directly from the farmers who grow it, all within 25 miles. We do tours. Typically right now that's on pause for COVID reasons, restrictions, but we do still have our tasting room, cocktail house, we like to call it. You can do samples. You can have cocktails with our spirits and hang out here. And it's a big tourist destination here, even though for a little town because of the pickers. And we've got a brewery next door, a winery down the street. So there's lots of cool things here locally to do. And we do technically distribute our products out to about 20 states, but Iowa and Illinois is 85% of our business or more. So
it makes sense. Grain to glass. I really like that banner. It's perfect way to think about it, because I think especially in restaurants, we've been talking about, you know, farm to table, nose to tail, these different things for a long time. I think now for distilleries to be thinking about that is important. I also think it's important, and we'll talk about this a little bit when we talk about your production, is you don't always know where that NGS is coming from, that neutral grain spirit. You don't always know where and who is actually producing what you're drinking. And so it's an interesting dynamic. There's a lot to learn on the back of a label of a bottle, and we'll get into that a little bit. Take it back for you. We're always fascinated why we get into this crazy industry. Why the hell would you want to be a distiller? And so take us back a little bit. Kind of, you know, what was the catalyst that gets you here? What were you doing? Because I know this is a second career, so to speak. Take us back a little bit.
Right. Did my wife tell you to ask that question?
Right. Yes.
Strangely enough, we're a family business. My brother and I are the sole owners of the company. We've been at it for almost 10 years now. And 10 years ago, he was designing highways in Dallas, Texas. I was a TV meteorologist for 15 years. And we grew up in a family business. Our dad and his 3 brothers ran a road construction company together, which still exists. It's been going over 50 years. And I don't think we knew how much we knew about family business until we started one on our own. But we wanted some of those freedoms that your own business, you know, affords you. We knew from growing up, you know, you get to pick which 80 hours a week you work and things like that. And so we had this idea. In a state of Iowa, it was illegal. It was perfectly legal to distill. Iowa is actually the #1 beverage alcohol producing state in the country. You don't know it because of that NGS you're talking about. Barge loads, truckloads of neutral grain spirit is made here because of the corn that we have here by large industrial distilleries, but it's not bottled here. So Iowa doesn't get the credit for it. But anyway, the state of Iowa had a lot of success back in the early 90s, deregulating things for wineries to develop them for tourism. And they were looking at some measures to try the same thing for distilleries. And we thought it was a chance to get on the ground level of something cool. You know, about that time in 2009, there were maybe 200 to 300 small distilleries across the country at that point. We're going to finish 2020 closer to 2,000. Yeah. So the industry has grown tenfold. But we thought it was a kind of a cool idea. It was funny, and then the more we got to looking at it, it really had potential. And when we wrote a business plan, did some training, when a bank started throwing money at us, we thought we were onto something. But I would say that we love to drink. That was one thing. But our development of this business came more as an interest and a passion in having something that we own, more so than just per se, we really want to make whiskey. But I will say that we got into it, we really wanted to make whiskey.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. So then when you're thinking about, let's move into what's happening now. When you're thinking about the ethos of what you're talking about, right? Neutral grain spirits, massive amounts of production, big production. You wanted to go very small. You could have gone the route of just becoming a bottler. You could have gone the route of washing those neutral grain spirits and calling them your own. You could have gone a lot of different ways because you have access to that product. And plenty of companies that make a good end product do that as well. I think transparency is an important word in that process. For you wanted to go the hard way, the very hard way of going local. It's more expensive, all that. So talk about, again, why that was so important. And then let's get practical. Like as a business operator, how do you go find these farmers? How are you sourcing that product? How are you pricing? So we'll go down that rabbit hole, but start big picture, the ethos. Why going the difficult route of being a producer, growing the grains locally, all of that?
Right. Well, when we started, we were gearing towards tourism. We wanted people to be able to come here and see what we do. And when we decided we were going to do that, it was really important to us that it was authentic, exactly what you're talking about. We had seen people coming up through the industry at that point in time that were, just rebottling and things like that. I think the industry has come a long ways in being a little more transparent about that. But, it didn't make any sense to bring somebody on a distillery tour and show them this place. And this is where we buy a big tank and then we put it in bottles. That didn't make any sense. When we decided we were going to mill our own grain and do some of that stuff, then it was like, we looked at, okay, a 50-pound bag of milled corn was about $50. A bushel of corn from a farmer here, which is 56 pounds at its worst, is $8. Right now it's running about $4, $3. So we were like, oh, we could this would make our margins look better if we could find some corn locally. Well, once we decided to do that locally, then it just kind of snowballed on us into everything we were doing. The tasting room was decked out in barnwood that was salvaged locally. And, sometimes being local means we buy a bottle that was made in Missouri instead of one that was made in China and things like that. It just kind of pervaded everything we did. But finding the grain was it was fun. We just started driving out of town looking for the biggest storage bins that we could find. We found 2 corn farmers right away.
Knocking on doors.
About a mile. And one of them, the first time we made stuff was like, so this is my corn in this bottle? And I was like, yeah. And he says, well, this might be the first time that I've ever known where my corn has ended up, except for when I feed it to my own cows. Because here we're right on the Mississippi River, the commodities markets, they're loading it on barges. It's going down to the Gulf of Mexico, and the bulk of it's going overseas, mainly to China. So these guys were really pumped that they were getting to participate. We don't use that in the grand scheme of what these guys are cranking out for corn. We're using just a tiny bit of it, even though it's a lot to us. Once we found the corn guys, we had a guy contact us. This is corn and soybean country here. We don't see a lot of wheat and rye and barley. Well, we had a guy south of town that was growing all kinds of organic grains there's a large Amish community south of Iowa City, about an hour west of here, and they wanted organic grain for their breads. So he was growing wheat, rye, barley, corn, all for these guys. So then we started to get that. Then we find a guy across the river that has a bunch of sandy river bottom soil that doesn't grow corn very well. So every year he plants rye. The reason he plants rye is so that he can cut it up into little bales to sell to these home improvement stores for decorations for people to buy at Thanksgiving and Halloween time, and has nothing to do with the grain. So all of a sudden we have rye coming in. So it was bizarre and awesome how we found these guys. But I mean, we know the first names, we know the families of everybody that grows our grain. We're right outside Moline, Illinois, where John Deere tractors John Deere is headquartered. Well, we have a guy that is a John Deere tractor collector. He has all these old tractors, and he said, could I plant some stuff for you guys so I can run my old tractors? Well, we said, I don't really need corn, but if you want to do some of these smaller grains, great. So now he's doing some wheat and barley for us. So it's been great. It's been cool as part of the community. It lends an authenticity to our products that can't be replicated. And I think in turn, by going down that route, what you end up with is a product that doesn't taste like everybody else's. And sometimes people look at us with kind of a weird eye and say, this doesn't taste like Kentucky bourbon. And I say, well, of course not. That's because it's Iowa bourbon. And I think if you look back at craft brewing, you go 15, 20 years ago, if you would have served somebody a New England IPA in 1985, they would have punched you in the face because no one would even be able to get their brain around it. Craft distilling is at that infancy stage. And I think what you're going to see as the consumer becomes more educated, which is happening all over the place, they start to understand that, okay, there's really great whiskey coming out of Kentucky. I like it, but it's pretty uniform. It's all made the same way. It tastes relatively the same. What if I look at some of these craft whiskeys and wow, look at this, this flavor, that flavor. When we talk to bartenders, when we talk to restaurants, we talk about putting tools in your toolbox. Look, you can make the exact same cocktail out of all 20 of those bottles of bourbon you have up there. But what about this one? What about that one? What about this one finished in a Armagnac cask that we did as an experimental, things like that craft can bring to the table that otherwise isn't there. And I think there's huge windshield out down the road in front of craft distilling because of this, because I think people now more than ever want to know what's local, what's different, what can I try? They're not as brand loyal. We understand that, but we only need to shave just a little bit from the big guys in the marketplace to get them concentrating on craft. And if they like mine, they're going to like the distillery down the road, and these guys and the rising water is going to float all the boats. And I think it's really evident when you start looking at the craft cocktail scene going on across the country right now that people are paying attention. They're finding value in it, and they're moving in that direction.
Lot of good stuff to unpack there, Ryan. I want to start with you went down the rabbit hole. That's a scary rabbit hole for somebody who's an entrepreneur, a small business owner starting out. There's a lot of easier ways again. Yet what I really like, it really crystallizes one of the ethos of our thing. I'm going to pop this up. Good people connecting good people always wins. It always wins. And so the one farmer now is like, wow, he's telling the story of his product represented there. I'm sure they come into the tasting room. I'm sure when they're there, you got to introduce them to everybody because it really matters. That story matters because the product, to your point, can be commoditized. It absolutely is. There's a lot of white noise. So good people connecting good people, I think, is really important. All of a sudden, you start meeting more and more people because you put yourself out there and people gravitate towards that. So I really like that. A sense of place. I very much felt that when you were talking as well. So I'm very interested in talking about that. And then I want to talk about your product. But sense of place, I think, is really important. You mentioned the tourism. You mentioned right off Pickers and Bill Cody. Like there's some history and there's something contemporary happening. I think that's important. The tasting room, having the wood, the reclaimed wood. These are really important elements where they can't experience that anywhere else. It is only in LeClaire. So let's dig into that. The importance of brand and experience on the guest side, because I think, honestly, a lot of times that matters even more than what's in the glass, because it truly is the memory. They'll tell the story of meeting the farmer more than they'll say, this is my favorite whiskey, even though that may be their favorite whiskey. So I'm fascinated in that. Sense of place. Talk about how you guys are executing upon that.
Well, you really just put your finger on a huge pivot of our whole business over the past couple of years. I think anybody that starts in craft has visions of, being the next Bullet or, whatever big brand that goes, Tito's goes national and things like that. And you start getting out there and slugging it out in the marketplace for, this little bit of shelf space. And then you realize that, hey, the real value in what we do is when somebody walks through the door and gets to say, I sat down with Ryan and we talked about this and we met the guys and we saw the farmers, picture on the wall and we did this and we did that. And they have a story to tell and it's real and it's can be shared. And we've really shifted from trying to grow our brand nationally to we've actually contracted several markets, pulling back into Iowa and Illinois, our home, where it matters to somebody that this vodka was made from corn from 2 miles up the road, and where we have a chance to connect with people. We are reinvesting instead of trying to hire salespeople to go all over the country. We're reinvesting in adding onto our facility, growing what's happening here, trying to put in an event center, which we're going to do. We just getting ready to do it right before COVID hit, and we'll wait until people are ready to convene again. But, some things like that to try to build on the immense value of what we have, what we're standing on here on the banks of the Mississippi River. And so I think it's so critical to what we do. And I think as the marketplace becomes more crowded with, hundreds and hundreds more craft distilleries, what we found is where, we were kind of ahead of the game. We used to be able to send whiskey out to New York City and Washington, D.C. and sell it there and things like that. Now there's local distilleries there, and people are buying them, and they should go experience them. So we want to make sure we stake our claim on our home. And so we spent a lot of time in Chicago and Des Moines, here around the Quad Cities, concentrating on Iowa and Illinois. And our biggest investment, our biggest point of purchase, our number one customer is ourselves here in LeClaire, at the distillery, bringing people in to tour around.
That anybody who has a distillery, a brewery, a winery, a restaurant needs to listen to that. The number one investment is in yourself. And that is such an important distinction versus in your business, even though it is your business, but yourself, because you're investing in your brand. And the extension therein is your tasting room and the experience that you're creating. And anybody who works in the tasting room, like that, I think is a very important distinction. Number one investment is in yourself. So I really like that. I think people need to listen to that and pay attention. The importance of brewers, bartenders. The importance of bartenders. You mentioned them having 20 different options for a bourbon to put in that cocktail, yet they're selecting yours. They have massive amounts of attention. Restaurants, bars have massive amounts of attention. Bartenders absolutely are able to connect with people and introduce them to new products. We know in the marketplace that you see 80% of the sales happen in liquor stores, 20% in what called on-premise restaurants. All right. Mm-hmm. Yet 80% of your marketing dollars, your attention, your time and effort usually is with restaurants, because the way that the market works is somebody goes to a restaurant, has a cocktail, and is introduced to a new product. They go directly to their liquor store and say, I had this amazing cocktail at this bar. Do you carry it? And that drives demand on the retail side. So just a little breakdown for kind of how it works very simplistically. Anyway, bartenders, the importance of connecting to bartenders. Talk about how that group has been instrumental in helping you build your brand and your story and get your product out there.
It's so interesting to walk into an account and visit with somebody. It used to be that you'd say, okay, we have this whiskey we're making. You're doing what? You're making now, there's coming. How old is it? Where was it made? What's it made from? They're going to hold you accountable to it. Sure. There's going to be one guy who's going to say, how much is it? How much is it an ounce? I don't care. I can do this for cheaper. I'm out, whatever. There's going to be another guy who's going to taste that and he's going to experience it. He's like, oh, wow, we could do this really cool take on, this cocktail or that cocktail. And you just see their eyes light up and the gears are turning. And they're the foodies of booze. They're the guys and girls that they plug into it. They get craft. They understand. They can tell that it's a well-made product, and they understand that it's not for every cocktail, but they understand this concept of a new tool in the toolbox, and they're excited to get on it, and they're excited to find something that isn't everywhere. That's always nice too, when you can come out and say, hey, have you had Cody Road whiskey? I've never heard of it. Well, let me tell you the story of these guys and these farmers, and here it is, and just taste this cocktail. You're going to die. It's so good. And and those they're not always easy to find. It's different accounts put a different priority on what they're doing with their cocktail program, and we understand that. But man, it's fun when you find them, and it's so fun to connect and to grow together and to see that value being added back and forth between each other. That makes it fun to go out and do the sales side of it all.
I love it. And I want to go even deeper on the bartender, because we always have our guests give shout outs to others. Who's another human in hospitality, food and beverage that just is doing things right, just somebody that you want to interact with. And so, legendary place for sure. But tell us about Micah Melton. I appreciate this so much, Ryan, because My whole mission is just to be introduced to as many what we call unsung hospitality heroes. So many people across hospitality, food and beverage that just grind and hustle, and they're in the trenches, and they really are the ones that make it happen. And I want to be introduced to all of them. I want to talk to every single one of them, Ryan. It will take multiple lifetimes, but I'm game. So Micah Melton, now I'm going to know Micah Melton. I'm excited about that. Anyway, I'm ranting. Micah Melton, tell us a little bit about Micah and Aviary as a spot to have your brand, because that's an important brand within Chicago and the whole, scene of cocktails nationally.
Yeah. So Aviary is born out of Grant Hackett's Alinea Group. They have the restaurant Alinea. And then Aviary, I call it a cocktail lab, because like you go in there and they have a full staff, but they're not cooking anything. They're making these presentation cocktails where there's a Bunsen burner bubbling up on this thing and stuff coming out the top, and all these different deals are coming together, and a big smoked balloon that blows up.
Really Wonka
it's
stuff.
Amazing. Yeah, it's so cool and awesome. Well, Micah is a hometown guy here in the Quad Cities. He's from Davenport, Iowa. One of the most humble people I've ever met in the business. Here's a guy that is developing cocktails for one of the world's best, most well-regarded cocktail bars and restaurant groups in the world. And he's just like, hey, what's going on? Can I come down to the distillery? Let's check out, let's taste some barrels, do some stuff. Next thing you know, he's bringing in our rye whiskey by the barrel. He's come here and done cocktail training for local bartenders in Davenport, Iowa. I mean, he has no need to do that. And he's not, when we worked in Chicago from small town Iowa, I'll be honest, sometimes we run into these egos and these people that are like, well, you know who I am. I'm sitting here in Chicago, Illinois. What the heck are you? Micah is the antithesis of that. He is the most down to earth. If he has a bit of information that could help you be a better bartender, be a better restaurant, be a better any person, he'll simply just offer that to you quietly. Here it is. And he's taken interest in us that he doesn't have to do. He's recognized the quality in our products. When everything went to hell in a handbasket here with the shutdowns, he called and said, what do you have that is a cocktail like an RTD, what ready to drink? And we have in our cocktail house, we barrel age a Manhattan that we do with Brovo Spirits, Jammy Vermouth. By the way, these guys out in Woodinville, Washington, just throw that name out there. These guys are awesome. Domestically made vermouth. Check it out. And then we do a barrel aged old fashioned where we mix the cocktails up, put them back into the used barrels that they came out of, and then we filter it after a couple months back in the barrel and bottle it. So we already had label approval and stuff for that to go out the door. So next thing you know, Micah and Alinea and Aviary are, as part of their to-go packages, you can select a bottle of cocktail, and we're selling, old fashioned in Manhattan like crazy. He didn't have to do that. They could have developed something themselves. They could, a million different things. He reached out to us and said, hey, we like what you do. Can you help us out? We'll help you out, and we'll all get through this crazy storm together. So, I can't say enough good stuff about Micah, about what they're doing there. If you've never heard of them, never been to Alinea, never been to Aviary, it'll blow your mind. Check it out and tell them we sent you.
Micah, we're coming for you. We need to talk. This is exactly the kind of people that this industry is full of. Just so many good people. And look, there's a lot of prima donnas, and there's a lot of ego, and there's a lot of bravado. To your point, it's a strength and weakness. It's why we can put on a good show, and it's why sometimes we need to eat a little humble pie. There's no doubt about that, Ryan. So I appreciate you pointing out both sides of that coin. But Mike is exactly what we need in this industry. More people connecting good people. I mean, it just comes back to that again and again. So I really appreciate that. You mentioned the ready to drink cocktails. I'm a big fan of that. Anybody who's in distilling who's not doing that, you're missing the boat 100%. Huge opportunity to go, again, direct to consumer, have them ready to go and reduce friction, I think is what it really does. Let's talk about some of your products. I love that we got the still and the jacketed tanks behind you. Tell us about a couple of your products.
So our mainstream, our biggest sellers are Cody Road bourbon and rye whiskeys, and those are the backbones of much of the stuff that we do. So like we have the bourbon, which is a wheated bourbon, and our mash bills are right on the bottle. We tell everyone it's 70% corn, 20% wheat, 10% barley, who the farmers are, all that stuff. We do a 95% rye. We need a little bit of malt in there to help in the mash tank with the rye. It gets really sticky.
Yep.
But so those two, then we take and we do different derivatives. So like the rye is the backbone of the Manhattan, the bourbon, the old fashioned. We partner with a local honey producer. We do a Cody Road honey. We have a guy with 600 acres of maple trees, and we get maple syrup from him, and we do Cody Road maple. So going down that flavoring route, but when people roll their eyes and then they taste them and they're like, oh my gosh, this is like clover honey. This is not just sugar and some flavoring. I'm like, yeah, that's what we do. That's what we do. We're authentic, and it's fun and cool. We do make vodka and gin, and that's all from corn based locally. And then we spin those off into seasonal liqueurs and things like that people love when they come out to the distillery to try different flavors. Like we do a strawberry vodka made with local strawberries from a berry patch about 30 miles west of here, things like that. But Cody Road is our biggest brand name. It's the one that is getting the most traction out there, and it's the one that we have the most fun making and things like that. The other thing that's cool, I think really the next step in craft distilling, and one of the things that we're starting to dip our toe into, we have a series called Cody Road X, and it's experimental barrel finishes. So like we did bourbon in a used tequila barrel, and we released that. This fall we're doing side by side. We got a couple Portuguese brandy barrels, and so we put bourbon in one, rye in the other, and we're releasing those next to each other so that you can see what the barrel does to those whiskeys that way. And we've got some rum barrels, and I said earlier, an Armagnac, huge Armagnac barrel down in the basement that we filled with bourbon. And so I think that's one of the other cool things about craft is that ability to we get 2 barrels. Well, we can fill those up and release that product. No big deal. Fun, cool. Just like a brewery would have a quick one-off, we're going to make a couple kegs and call it good. Those are the kind of things that we can do here that keep it interesting and fun and unique and keep people coming back.
I think what you said about the rolling their eyes, right? That's probably a lot of like people in the restaurant side or professional drinkers. They're like, flavored whiskey, come on. Mm-hmm. Yet local, the honey is from right over there. It changes everything. It's not some Italian syrups, or it's not some like frozen purees, which look, you can do plenty of good things with those. Yet what you're talking about, it just takes us to another level. Right. It keeps a really quality base product at a high level, and still is very smart, because absolutely honey and maple, those are going to sell. They just are, right? You can do it thoughtfully. What the worst is that I see is somebody has a really great base product, and then they get pancake syrup, call it maple, right? And I'm like, no. You missed the mark twice, because you had a great base product, and then you put garbage in it, and then you're trying to sell it as something more special than the base. So you're diminishing the brand of your base because the extension is worse. So, oh man, you and I could go for hours and hours about all of that. I really appreciate that. So, and I saw this was great. Stephanie, thanks for this. Micah's experience is unbelievable, amazing, and worth the trip to Chicago. Could not agree anymore, because look, we know restaurants, breweries, distilleries, they need your support so much right now. So find the opportunity to support them, and knowing people like Ryan and Micah are out there, it matters. So this was an amazing conversation. Any last thoughts you want to leave us with before we let you go?
Just want to give a quick shout out to all of our farmers in Iowa and all the people. If you're watching the news, we had the equivalent of a Category 2 hurricane roll through here earlier this week, and there's hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of corn laying flat in fields right now. It took about a 70-mile wide swath down the middle of the country, or the state. Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Des Moines, Davenport are flattened. And so just to ask you to keep your hearts open, watch. There's going to be opportunities to help these folks out. It's going to be the farmers, the restaurateurs. I mean, it's been such a 2020. What else you got? We're still standing, but what else you got? It just seems like one thing after another. So just want to give a shout out there and hope that as folks are listening from across the country, there's a huge devastation here in our backyard, and just ask you to keep your ears and eyes out for chances to help those folks.
And you'll be hearing more from us on that. We'll be sharing some things as we have, anybody who knows the show, that's where I came up in the industry. My uncles have 5-6 restaurants in Ames. My wife, Betsy, you guys have met her before. She's a cyclone through and through, which there's.
We're all Cyclone grads here, so.
Oh, all right. So
yep.
it is the Hawkeye state. Her brother went to Iowa, and so there's an internal family rivalry there. But Iowa, just the best people, and from food and beverage, hospitality, just we need to support. And honestly, from a food system standpoint, which we're talking about a lot of as well on this show, this is going to have a massive impact, because that corn, the soybeans, those products are going to a lot of different places that support our economies and our food system. So we need to pay attention to what's happening there, because it really matters. And there's a lot of farmers and restaurants and breweries and distilleries and wineries that are hurting right now. So look out for more from that. But Ryan, really, really appreciate the conversation. Love the ethos, love where you're coming from. And excited to see kind of what you guys do next. I'm very interested in these side by sides. We'll have to link up on that, because
yes, for sure. And we're not in between Ames and Colorado, but if you're driving east from Ames, we're about 2 hours away. So definitely look me up if you're heading this direction.
Well, now I'm going to Avery.
Yes.
I don't know why I can't say this word. Aviary. I'm going to the Aviary, and we're stopping by on the way. Hell, I might just pick you up and we'll go hang out with Mike.
Yes, let's do that.
All right, Ryan, have a great day. Take care. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. Ryan Burchett, definitely check out what's happening with Mississippi River Distilling Company. Absolutely. If you can get your hands on that product, if you're in the Chicago area. If you don't know, now you know. Absolutely. And there's so much happening, so much destruction in Iowa. I mean, 70, 100 miles wide, and it went 700 miles west to east in 14 hours. Unbelievable devastation. And so there's a lot of people out there that are hurting, restaurants shutting down because power was out for 2, 3, 4 days. Some people don't even have power back yet. So let's make sure and send some attention and love there. And if there's opportunity to support, please do. Again, this Best Served Chilled. This channel is about beverage producers and professionals. Really, it's about the humans that are out there passionate about supporting farmers, about creating a sense of place in their towns, and it really matters. So yeah, Best Served Podcast 176. Talk local grains, talk farming, talk distilling, talk the importance of creating a sense of place with Ryan Burchett of Mississippi River Distilling Company out there in LeClaire, Iowa. That's it for today, everybody. Appreciate you as always. Cheers.